We all know about the Lord of the Rings trilogy written by J.R.R. Tolkien and adapted into films by Peter Jackson. They are extremely popular books and award-winning movies that continue to catch the eyes of millions of fantasy fans around the world. But what if I told you that the events of the stories Tolkien wrote about within his books were actually true events from history?
Tolkien is real may sound strange at first, but trust us when we say that this one is worth hearing about. The rumor goes that Tolkien, while in the basement of the Oxford Library, found an old book explaining the truth behind our ancient history. From 6500 BC at earliest, we will go into more detail about different characters from this beloved franchise, representing beings and other historical figures.
According to J. Widener, the main contributor to this theory, the villain Sauron is actually from Saturn, harkening back to our previous episode. The Rings of Power in The Lord of the Rings as well represent the Rings of Saturn. The name Sauron, according to Widener, comes from Sargon, the ancient Mesopotamian dictator who, quote, invented time, or in better terms, invented clocks and calendars.
More information includes the orcs being aliens that were cloned to be an army, and even giants. This, of course, is backed with evidence. The evidence being skeletons of giants you can find online, which have already been proven to be photoshopped. Widener as well claims that the goal of the real Sauron was to enslave humanity. As well as this, he claims that today governments hide these findings. For what reason, though? Who knows? All of this is way too random and without evidence to be true.
There is a very interesting thread on 4chan's paranormal board discussing the same topic in much more detail. More specifically, if Tolkien's Silmarillion is actually an account of ancient history. Even some posters claim that Tolkien himself said that the stories were true during interviews. This entire thread uses a large 100-plus page PDF called Alterwelt as a guide.
Alterwelt is an entire document connecting conspiracies and evidence to make an argument for humanity having a more complex past. This is a topic for an entirely different video, but there are sections of the document that do claim the same thing that the Widener post said. That Tolkien was much more aware of our true past and discussed it through his books.
The main points of the document say that the Tolkien novels are allegories for true ancient history. It also claims that there are drops of truth and veiled accuracy to what he wrote. The 4chan thread first mentioned does quickly devolve into nonsense about demons and aliens and other strange things that seem too quickly to move away from Tolkien's work.
The idea of Tolkien's work being true history gets more and more ridiculous the farther you look into it. But could there be some ideas that weren't public at the time of Tolkien's writing that could be true? Fossils in Indonesia were found that closely resembled the hobbits of Tolkien lore. These very old fossils were just over a meter or about 3 feet tall as adults. This is most likely an example of adaptations. These early human-like people most likely adapted to be small to accommodate for less resources or less land.
Is it a coincidence that Tolkien wrote about a small human-like species nearly 50 years before a species of very similar description was discovered? Most likely so. In truth, it's not that hard to make up a species like that, or there to be a real-life species similar. If he was aware of this fact, though, it would be a gateway to possibilities that he did have access to knowledge that we, at the very least, didn't have at his time. If that is true, then what else would Tolkien have known and written about?
A pretty far-fetched idea, unfortunately. There is no proof that he had that knowledge. What is more likely is the idea that Tolkien based his stories off of mythology and recorded ancient history. There is documented evidence that Tolkien took inspiration from things like Beowulf, the Nodens, and Greek and Roman mythology.
The majority of species that Tolkien wrote about in his books were already pre-established within mythology. Where do these mythologies get their ideas? I don't know. Maybe they are true. But if they are true, it's still less of a stretch that Tolkien took them from the mythology over the source.
Including this, there are documented quotes where Tolkien said that his books were influenced by other writings, mythology, history, and his own personal experiences. Of course, the 4chan thread earlier tried to claim that these quotes from him aren't true, or were made up or assumed, but I'd rather trust Tolkien himself over some 4chan users.
Taking both ideas into account, it just makes more sense that Tolkien took from true history over taking it from a secret history the public isn't aware of. I'm not saying though that there isn't history that we aren't allowed to know about. I for one am really interested in the theory that ancient people were a lot more advanced than we were told. I'm just skeptical that Tolkien himself was aware of secret history and wrote about it. He was a smart man, yes, but there is no evidence. Plus, a lot of mythological creatures and stories were known long before Lord of the Rings was published.
Sometimes speculation is nothing more than that. Some ideas are just too far-fetched to be true. But who knows, sometimes the truth is stranger than we'd like to think. Stay curious.
Join us again next time, when we once again go obscure.